Hello, my name is Emily Edkin, and this is my self-reflection after taking course 818. This slide is where a YouTube link to my presentation will be held. Focusing on the question, were instructional activities successful? Why or why not? I would say that most of my instructional activities were successful, and those that weren't successful helped me a lot because I learned even more from the unsuccessful experience. I feel like them being unsuccessful or successful was mostly based off my own observations, as well as my collaborating teacher, because we worked together to see what things went well and what things did not go well. Some successful items that happened were I was able to form relationships with students throughout the experience, despite having to manage their behavior in a different way. And I had some successful moments with that and some unsuccessful moments. Other things that went well was my differentiation or focusing on that socio-emotional behavior and health. And I think those were all part of my plan of what I wanted to work on. And I had a really good time going through those successful moments and the unsuccessful that helped me grow a lot in this course. Could any issues or problems observed have been avoided by pre-teaching expectations or developing clear rules or expectations? I think that is always the case. While I pre-teach a lot of my expectations, there are going to be some things that students need tightened up or reapproached in a different way, just to make sure that there is no wiggle room and the students know exactly what is expected of them when they walk into my room or to my small group, since a lot of my experiences that my collaborating teacher observed were focused on the small group. This year, especially with this observation, I found that some things that I've said to students may have made them more confused about a situation. And so I just really have to work on what language I'm using, especially since I want to make sure it's consistent within my classroom, no matter if it's whole group, small group, and even in outside my classroom, I want to make sure it goes with what other teachers are using and my building is using. So that I think there's always problems that could have been avoided that way. It's just working on it together. Were the students excited to be in class? I mean, yes and no. A lot of the groups that I had, especially that my classroom teacher observed, were groups that they have some weak areas they need to work on, and they were not always the most excited to be working with me. But I do like to have some very focused conversations about this topic, that even if students might not always be excited to work with me, that we can really see some growth if we are working together in order to be successful. I think there will be moments where students were really excited because they had that spark of success, and that's really what I want my students to get, that love of learning. But that might not always mean that they are excited every second in my classroom. There has to be that balance. And so a lot of times in my small groups, we'll be working on skills that we need to get better in, that will lead to having fun and engagement and other things like that. So it just needs to be a healthy mix of everything. Were the students engaged? I would definitely say engagement is one of my highest priorities in my classroom. Especially in small group, it's easy to see if students are engaged and those that are not. And my observations showed my collaborating teacher that there were some students that I wasn't necessarily watching to see their level of engagement. So that's something that I really want to be better at in the future. My collaborating teacher mainly focused on some students' nonverbal communication with me, into how that was showing me that they were not maybe in the right mindset to learn, or maybe this wasn't the right group for them and they weren't being adequately challenged. So I just think I need to be even better at tuning into what my students are feeling and the engagement level that they're having and how that ties to what they're getting out of my class. That would probably be, I think it was either in the first or second reflection journal. So it'd be something that I said I would definitely want to look back at. I think that's why it can be so helpful to have people watch you because you're not picking up on those things, and also to even videotape yourself teaching or your group to see how your students are acting and what could be the reason they're acting that way, because that could bring new things to light. Was student choice evident? If so, how? There was a mixture of student choice in my options. I love giving students choice throughout the day, and then we talk about how we can make choices and how we can do these things, but there are also moments where all of us will probably be needing to look at the same information, and then we'll take it apart in different ways. I like to do a lot of student choice in small groups, so I can really watch students and see what they're passionate about and what they're excited about, as well as what things they're struggling with. I think that small groups can lend a good time for students to really talk about things that they might need to discuss, whether it's things that they are having trouble with at home or their emotional behavior or health. And then it also lets me focus on gaps that they might have in their learning. And I think that's just such a valuable time where they can be vulnerable and we can grow together. Did assessments truly reflect student learning or merely task completion or skill memorization? I would say that the assessments were a mixture of both. At my district, the one that I was working at the time of my observations, there are some task completion activities that students are required to do that we don't necessarily get to choose if our students complete them or not. And there's also some that I love to complete in my classroom that really show students where they're at in their learning. We use a set of proficiency scales that students can rank themselves on, and my students use it almost daily to talk about their learning and where they're at and what they want to achieve. I just feel that that helps an assessment be more accessible to students and to really show them where they're at instead of just focusing on, can I do this or not? It's more of a scale that they can see that this is not something where they have to stay forever. It's just where they're at right now. And that gives them that great growth mindset and really sets them up for success in the end, because they can see how hard they've worked, where they're at now, and where they have yet to go. Specific strategies used to assist struggling students, gifted or accelerated. I feel that I do focus more on my struggling learners. That's not necessarily what I want to do all the time, but I do think it's more evident of the students that are struggling and the gaps that they need, and my time is spent there. This year, I've seen a lot more gifted and accelerated and been pushed in a lot of ways to find new ways to help them and to challenge them in areas that I haven't helped with in the past. So I think it's just so important to have that balance. I do a lot of scaffolding with my struggling students. Instead of completing a page of problems, the student will work to complete the first row. Whereas gifted and accelerated, I might have additional extension problems after the end of the worksheet or assignment. I do like a lot for my gifted and accelerated students. I always talk a lot about how if they have truly gained mastery in a content area or topic, they should be able to teach someone the skill. So they really enjoy getting to possibly teach a struggling student or someone who might just need a little bit of guidance. I think it gives a lot of ownership to the gifted and accelerated students, and also really helps the struggling students realize that that's kind of another person that can help them if I'm not always there. Since in my classroom today, I feel like a lot more struggling students than my gifted and accelerated. So I really want to use every tool that I have in my classroom to help my students succeed. Was an overall sense of pride evident in student learning, in teaching, and how might this be observed? I would say I definitely have pride in my teaching. Obviously, as a teacher, there are days when I feel like I do an amazing job and other days where I just have to remember that I can do it better the next time. That is something that I always try to show to my students. I take pride in my classroom, and we talk about that a lot, how this is a space that all of us can learn, and I want everyone to feel a sense of pride when they come in my classroom. I want them to feel that pride in the ownership of their learning and the fact that they are also responsible, and it's not just on their teacher, because I, as their teacher, can only do so much, and they will have to also help themselves. I think this is observed in the way that my students share their work with me. My students are constantly asking me to check things out that they are doing, or to send a note home to their parents because they're doing so well. It really shows me that they care about what they're doing and that they are working hard. I would say in my teaching, you might see a sense of pride when I share things with my colleagues. I really like to talk to other people, gain ideas from other people, and I'm a person that likes to listen and observe. And so this field experience was a really great time for that, where I got to share ideas and learn from others. How do teachers engage in professional development or professional learning communities? In my own building, we do weekly professional learning communities, and I heard that that is also the case with my collaborating teacher. They meet weekly, as well as just checking in daily, which is kind of how my building does it as well. In professional development, grade level teams also meet so that they can discuss how whatever the development topic is relates to their content. During this experience, I was able to go to a professional development session about trauma that I thought was very important in today's society. And it was really cool because instead of just focusing on the professional learning communities, they focused on switching it up and making sure to focus on trauma as a whole with the whole group involved. So I think it can be times where it's whole group related, and then it's kind of cool to be able to pull back, go into those smaller groups, and really dive into whatever you're working on. Those professional learning communities are especially important when you talk about lesson planning or unit guides, and where we want the focus to be with our student learning by the end of a certain period of time. In the building where I'm currently at, this is big this year because a lot of our content has changed, in that the curriculum that we are using in multiple areas has changed. And so professional learning communities, or PLCs, is something that I've had to depend on a lot this year, since we all feel kind of lost without talking to our teams. So the professional learning communities are a big part of schools today. School-home communication is super important. How is this best achieved? I think it just depends on what school you're at and the families involved. If school-home communication works through email, go ahead and do email. If phone calls work best, do the phone calls. If a note going home in the backpack works best, then that's what it should be done. There is never going to be a best method. It's whatever is going to help the student succeed. So in this situation, I didn't have a lot of school-home communication in my field experience, but there were moments where I got to listen in on my the teachers that I was observing during conferences, talk to the families, and it was just so inspiring to see the way that the families came and the school came, and they all worked together to make sure that the student was in the right place and receiving the support that they needed.